Okay, so this is episode one on my e-bike build, and in this video, I'm just going to show you a little bit of progress I've made so far, even though it's been hours worth of work, and what I plan on doing with the bike. It's pretty straightforward. For starters, I'll tell you I have the it's a 21-inch BMX Mongoose fat bike frame. It was like a dark grayish blue color, brand new. I didn't like the color. I want a certain look for this bike, so I stripped the paint off right away. When I stripped the paint, I used this stuff here, which is just basic paint stripper. It's a foam spray on. Stuff works great. You know, you spray it on the foam. It's very corrosive. You got to be careful with it. You know, it'll burn your hands. Definitely wear eye protection. You know, you don't want to get that stuff on your skin, especially in your eyes. Very dangerous stuff. But, you know, it basically took about, I'd say, 4 hours worth of work to strip and sand the frame to get it to the way I want it to look. So if you could see with this camera, I left it under a 220 grit sandpaper. Once I had the paint stripped off, I sanded everything by hand to really polish the metal, give it a nice shine. And I'm looking for that old school raw steel look. I like that look. You know, you don't see it that often. It's rugged looking. I like it. It's a fat bike, so I want it to look, I want it to look mean, so that's the look I'm going for. So I'm very happy with the way the frame came out. Now, I just want to tell you guys a little bit. I'm going to make this a very fundamental, e-bike for dummies type of video, because that's basically what I am when it comes to this. I mean, I used to build bikes when I was a kid. Obviously, that was way before e-bikes were around. They're fairly new, relatively speaking. I honestly had no idea what I was getting myself into. I did a lot of research, as much as I could, before I started purchasing anything. The first thing I found out is if you're going to build an e-bike, you must have a stainless steel frame. Do not attempt to build an e-bike without a stainless steel frame, because you're just going to snap. You're going to snap the wheel mounts in the back. That's why it has to be stainless steel. Not most people, but I've seen people actually reinforce and weld on extra steel just for extra security precaution on the existing frame. I'm not going to do that. This looks like a really strong weld. It's fairly thick metal, fairly thick steel, and I think it's overkill. Hopefully, I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'm going to pay by my wheel flying off while I'm riding a bike, and that remains to be seen. Okay, just a little bit more that you should know before you embark into this project. If you're going to strip the bike down and build the whole thing from scratch, do your research. Very important. I measured out everything with, I have a digital caliper. I know that this is exactly 175 millimeters. That's very important to know when you're purchasing a motor. I got a rear hub, 3,000 watt, 72 volt motor coming from China, mounted on a 20-inch fat rim that's 4 inches wide. So I'm confident that's going to work. It's going to fit. It should be here in about a week. I ordered it a couple of weeks ago. And, that's the motor I'm going with. The look I'm going for on this bike, I'm trying to make it look as clean as possible, as far as the wiring and just the basics of making it still look like a bicycle, because, I mean, I'm sure if you guys watch videos on YouTube, you'll see, I'm not knocking guys that build them, but I mean, some of these bikes, they look like a mess. They got wires all over the place, cardboard boxes around battery. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I want it to look nice. I don't want it to look like some piece of junk that I wired together, So the way I plan on doing that is I'm going to weld, when I get my seat post, I'm going to weld another pipe along the back of the post. And that's where I'm going to mount my tray, which is going to be right almost just a little bit lower than my bike seat. I'm going to mount my tray, and I'm going to make a custom fiberglass box for the battery and the controller, the ECU. I'm going to put them together. I'm going to separate them with something inside the box and vent it, and maybe put a fan in there too. But that's going to be the last thing I do. But I'm going to have that mounted right above the tire right here, and I'll probably have a mud guard under here too. But that's basically going to hide all the electronics. And the way I want to do it is I'm going to wire the hub the motor hub wire from here along the bottom of the frame up and directly into the box. So nice and clean. I won't have wires hanging all over the place over here. I don't want that. The only wire I'm going to have is for the digital display and for my brake. I'm not sure if I'm going to put a front brake yet. I'm going to test ride it. I'm going to see how the bike handles with just the rear disc brake and take it from there. You know, those brakes are pretty good if you have a good one. The motor I have comes with a disc brake and a caliper, and that brings me to my next topic. When you're purchasing a frame, you have to decide, you know, what you want to do as far as your brake system goes. This frame doesn't have a mount for your caliper for your disc brakes. It doesn't have one. Fortunately, I found an adapter connects to the hub of the rim. You know, you put it between the hub and the nut and the frame, and it loops around, and it has a connection where you can attach the caliper. So I ordered that. It was like $15, something cheap. So hopefully that works out well. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is when you choose your crankset. This is called a bottom bracket for those that don't know. I'm learning as I'm going. So like I said, I'm going to make this as fundamental as possible, this video. And I want to point something out. Before you buy another bottom bracket, you know, bearing set and spindle. Spindle is the stem that goes through, which connects your pedals. Know the size of your bottom bracket shell. This is your shell. Now, on the fat bikes, this shell is 100 millimeters, which is oversized. That is not standard when you buy a crankset. So if you walk into any bike shop and you're like, hey, I need a Euro bracket, you know, they'll give you something that's 68 or 72 millimeters. It's not going to fit this bike. So make sure you do your research, know the size, take your measurements, do what you have to do before you purchase anything, because you're just going to buy things twice. And as I mentioned, Euro bottom bracket, there's 3 different types of cranksets: Euro, American, and Spanish. This happens to be a Euro. If you look inside, I don't know if the camera focuses or not, you'll see it's threaded in here. Now, the Euro, the crankset, the bearing set screws into the actual shell. That's what the Euros do. Okay, the Americans, this is smooth. The Americans, well, the way they work is it's smooth, and they're sized where they you have to tap them in with you know, a soft hammer, and they actually wedge into place. So it's 2 different types. And in Spanish, it's basically just the bearing that you tap in. It's just, there's no shell, just the bearings tap in. I have no experience with either one of them. I've only been working with this, which is the Euro. So know what you're buying. And another thing, when you buy a Euro bracket, there's 2 different types of Euro brackets: the American version and the European version. This is the American version. The only difference between the 2 is the American version, these threads are reversed on the drive side. Drive side being where your sprocket goes. Very important, because if you buy the European version, or if you have the European version, it will not thread in because the threads are the wrong threads. They're reversed. So those are some things to keep in mind if you're going to start replacing your cranksets and stuff like that. Where I'm at right now is, like I said, I'm waiting for the hub to come. A couple of weeks. I got the cranks coming in a couple of days, so that's when I'll make my next video, and I'll put that together, and I'll give you my thoughts and everything on how I like it. The cranks that came with this bike, by the way, they were like the cheapest possible cranks that you'd ever see. I mean, old school, like metal bearings with the balls in them, you know, just stuffed in there, and they were barely greased, and literally the spindle didn't even spin when it got here. I mean, they basically just force you to replace it. So, you know, that's something to keep in mind. When you buy these frames, most of the time, they're not going to give you anything that's worth keeping as far as the mechanics of it go. You should change it, or at the bare minimum, at least clean it, make sure it's greased up and everything works good. This is still the original bearings for the fork, but when they came here, also very tight, not much grease. I cleaned them off. I greased them with white lithium grease, and these are working okay for now. And this rim came today. This is the front rim. Same thing, 20 inch by 4. As you can see, it's going to have a nice big fat beefy look to it. You know, the tires, I like that, and that's the look I'm going for. So that's that. That's video number one. The last thing I wanted to say is there's this stuff. If you're gonna go down a raw metal, if you have a similar idea, okay, when you're done and it looks like this, it will not stay like this. This is in my house, hasn't been exposed to the elements. Literally just got done sanding it yesterday. Cleaned it up. I put a little bit of the stainless steel polish on there, the spray. You know, you'll see this stuff here, the easy off stainless polish. It's great for cleaning it and everything, but don't expect it to, you know, give any kind of protection. What you have to do is there's a product that's sold in paint shops and also Home Depot or Lowe's or Sears or any of those places. It's called something with a P. I'll put the name up top. It's basically used for removing brush marks in paint. And for some reason, the stuff, it works on steel. When you put it on any kind of steel, you brush it on, it takes 24 hours to dry, but it dries hard, very durable, and it protects the steel. And you won't get any kind of oxidation or anything like that. So I'm going to do that tomorrow. I'm going to stop at Home Depot. I'm going to pick that up, and I'm going to seal the whole thing. So I won't have any issues with that. As a matter of fact, if you look close, you'll see that the fork, this was done about a week ago, the fork, and you can see there's already a little bit of oxidation on the fork. And this is just from sitting in my house. But that's what happens with raw metal. If you don't seal it, you don't protect it, it will rust. It will look like garbage. Unless that's the look you're going for, that vintage rust look, then I would suggest you seal this right away. I'm going to have to resand this a couple of little spots. No big deal. It takes 2 seconds with a 220 grit just to take off that rust look, and then I'm going to seal it right away. And that's that. So as the parts come in, I will be making more episodes. I expect this to take probably a month and a half. So if you're interested, stay tuned, and I look forward to seeing what your thoughts are. Anybody has any suggestions that has experience or comments or corrections, feel free. I am always up for constructive criticism, and definitely never I'm always willing to learn, I should say. So if anybody has any suggestions or ideas for me, feel free to comment. Take care.